So I think what we'll do now is we will kick off. I know that more folks are joining us by the moment, but I think it is now coming up to 5 past, and I think it would be great if we could just start our session. A reminder to everyone that we are recording the event. It will be part of a report which will be compiled by Professor Phil Brown from Huddersfield University. And Phil, thank you so much for that. I'm glad you've been able to join us. Also, a big thank you to the All-Party Parliamentary Group. I know some of the members from both the Commons and the Lords have joined us, though apologies today from Janet Whittaker, my friend in the House of Lords, who is also the co-chair, and also Nick Bourne, who is the Vice Chair, Lord Nick Bourne from the House of Lords, who can't join us today. And also a big thank you to the Roma Support Group for helping us to facilitate this event. I'm not going to say too much because I think it's really important that we get to our guest speakers. And the first of those is Miha Bika. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Miha to the event. Miha is a member of the Roma communities with over 10 years experience working with people from his community, and currently is a policy and campaign worker at Roma Support Group. And over the past 5 years, Miha has extensively worked on issues concerning the Brexit and EU resettlement scheme. And through this work, he has facilitated the resettlement scheme support for Roma communities across England, and has supported Roma communities further across the UK to raise the concerns in this relation. So Miha, I'm absolutely delighted that you've been able to join us, and I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you very much, and thanks very much everyone for joining today, for making your time to join us to hear from some updates from our work and some concerns that we're currently seeing in regards to the EU settlement scheme. I work at Roma Support Group. As mentioned, we are a charity set up in 1998 to provide support to Roma migrants looking to settle in the UK. We're an advice and support charity, and meaning that we mainly work to provide assistance to Eastern European Roma migrants in London and in the UK. But we also do some campaigning and policy work, especially in the last few years. Now, a huge part of our work, especially our policy work in the last few years, has been focused on the Brexit and the EU settlement scheme. And through that, we have worked a lot with other organizations in the migration sector, including organizations supporting specifically Roma migrants, Roma charities, Roma activists, and so on, to understand what is the situation in regards to the EU settlement scheme and to facilitate support for EUSS support for Roma migrants. And we have put that this experience, the information we've gathered together in the forms of reports, statements, which you can find on our website, romasupportgroup.org.uk. And recently we have done some work to understand more of the current challenges in regards to the EUSS. And when I mean current, I'm talking about post-grace period challenges that we are seeing. I'm going to share my screen to share with you some of the information that we've identified more recently, and I will explain what's that about. Now, let me see if I can. I hope that everyone can see this. Yeah, that's better. So we, to understand what are the current challenges, we undertook a survey recently with members from the Roma communities. We had a similar exercise in July 2020 when we supported a research by the New Europeans. And we've done this exercise now in February and March this year. Together, we both in 2020 and 2023, we surveyed 93 Roma people, and we questioned them around the use of the EUSS online account, the use of their digital immigration status, and the current challenges around that. Now, we know that this data and the number of people that we surveyed may not be representative for the whole Roma population in the UK. But the information we identified is very consistent to what we have found out from all Roma organizations providing support to Roma in the UK, the organizations that we are in touch with and we are collaborating with. So what we've seen, for example, we've seen that there is an overrepresentation in the case of Roma in regards to how many have pre-settled status. We cannot confirm what is the level of EUSS intake in the Roma, so to say how many have already applied or not. That's very hard to say in regards to all EU citizens, as I'm sure you may be aware. But what we can see in regards to Roma communities is that there is an overrepresentation of the pre-settled status holders. Now, the national pictures shows that for the EU citizens, about 41% of EU citizens have pre-settled status. Currently, we are seeing that the levels of work is still quite intensive. Organizations supporting Roma are reporting that they still see the same level of work around EUSS as in a pre-deadline period. That work is mainly focused around late applications, especially for children, supporting people who are still awaiting for a decision to either submit evidence or get updates from the Home Office, and also support to access the EUSS account and to provide the immigration status. We're also seeing support being requested in regards to joining family members and assisting people who have who are experiencing issues at border. Now, we want to attract attention to a few specific points which we think are very relevant, and one of that is regarding the use and access of the EUSS account itself, which people have once they are granted status. And we see that 71% of the people that we have questioned are saying to us that they need help to access that EUSS account. So they either, for example, need help with, they don't have access to their email addresses that they've used when applying. They don't have access to the phone numbers they've used when applying, so they cannot provide a security code which is sent to them in order to access this EUSS account. Or they have other issues around it. And this raises with us a problem that it may be soon in the future, we'll see people losing access to this account and therefore not being able to prove that they already have an EUSS immigration status when they will be asked by third parties. In regards to those who have pre-settlers, who have been granted pre-settled status, we have asked them both in 2020 and 2022. We have asked them if they are aware when and how to apply for settled status. And we see that vast majority of people we've been questioning are saying that they don't know when and how to apply for settled status. And again, this raises that concern that people will not be able to update to settled status and therefore are likely to lose their immigration status soon if no action is being taken. Now, we've also looked at proving the immigration status since this is a legal requirement, and we've asked people if they are aware of the existence of the digital immigration status, if they know if they know what to do in regards to proving, and also if they've actually been asked to prove status, and what happened after that. So we've seen that 37% of the people that we've asked are aware of their digital immigration status. So only 37% are aware of it. Then in regards to knowing how to prove their immigration status, 29% said yes. And looking at who has been already asked to prove immigration status, we see that 42% have already been asked to prove their digital immigration status. And out of those, 69% have been able to prove it, while 31% have not been able to do so. So as you can see, 42% have been already asked to prove status, and 69% were able to prove it. But out of those, 15% said that they paid someone to help them. Others said that they've been helped by a charity or a friend to prove it. But still 31% were not able to prove it at all. And from those who were not able to prove it, we've heard that, for example, they had issues with employers telling them to stay at home until they will be able to prove it. People shared that they could not get a mortgage because of that, for example, or they could not get health support when they needed because they were not able to prove their status. So there are a few challenges, the main ones. I don't want to be too long, but the sort of main issues are in regards of the use of the access and use of the EUSS online account, proving immigration status, and updating from pre-settled status to settled status. So these three main issues we would like to raise awareness on and make the point that support is very much still needed to be in place to make sure that all the success that has been recorded so far in regards to the huge number of people who have applied and have been granted status, to follow up on all that huge success. Help is still needed in terms of actually using this immigration status, and we really think that support should be in the form of local authorities facilitating something for the medium to long term sort of support to be put in place for this kind of help to be available at local level for people to be able to access their EUSS account, to update from pre-settled status to settled status, and to prove their immigration status when they will be asked to do so. So I guess I will end here my presentation, and there will be time for questions just a bit later. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you.
On the follow-up. Now, yes. Also, we'll publish this information and we'll share a link with everyone.
That's great, Miha. And yeah, thank you so much, because I think it just raises the whole issue that digitization without support is actually a failure of the policy and the system itself. And it's great to see that has been highlighted in your report. I'm going to move on just in terms of trying to keep the pace. Just remind everyone, there is going to be time for Q&A. If you do have a question, can I ask that you type question into the chat section, because if too many hands all go up at one time, the kind of virtual hands, it gets a wee bit lost, and then we lose as to who's asking questions first. So if you could do that, that would be absolutely fantastic. If you could type question into the chat function. And also just to mention that Mary Killifoy MP has also sadly not been able to join us today. And I know that Mary would have loved to have been here, but it's actually in Belfast. So thank you, Miha. I'm going to move on now to Martina. Martina Stefakova has worked as a family support worker in Eastwood Rotherham, predominantly with the Roma community for over the last years as part of the charity Clifton Learning Partnership, and is looking to show us some issues around the observations that Martina has had in terms of some of the challenges that people face accessing the system. So I'm going to hand over to you now, Martina.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Martina from Clifton Learning Partnership. I have worked with the predominantly Roma residential area for last 8 years. Our charity offers advice and assistance in every aspect of life. Category of issues is pre-settled status, a family joint member, certificate of application, and a resolution center. So I just put you a few examples. Pre-settled status struggle with temporary accommodation. We had case where the family have been evicted because of the rent arrears and low income. Housing departments can't give family temporary accommodation because they have pre-settled status. People with pre-settled status don't have the same rights as those who have settled status. This wasn't mentioned in the first place. Certificate of application, people who have applied after deadline cannot travel outside of UK. Clients who live in the England 17 years has applied for EU settlement scheme after deadline because he didn't have valid passport. On Christmas, he traveled back to his country for 2 weeks. And when he came back to England at the borders, they didn't want to let him back into England. They said to him, because he applied after EUSS after deadline, and still don't have your status outcome, you don't have right to reside in the UK. They gave him stamp into his passport for 2 months and told him if he didn't receive an outcome from Home Office before this date, he needs to leave from the UK. This information is very important, so I think people should know about any update from Home Office. Joint family member is very tricky. 16 years old girl came in the UK to live with her sister because her mother died and she has nobody in Slovakia to live with. So she came to the UK to live with her older sister, and she can support her and give her education. She applied for EU settlement scheme. Her application has been refused because she cannot link to her sister to her status. Home Office sent her email stating that she can't be in the UK for 6 months, and after 6 months she needs to leave UK. If she's not, she will be deported. And last one, resolution center for clients is hard as they don't answer and people get stressed and angry about it. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Martina, thank you so much. The lived experience of people having to utilise the scheme is crucial, I think, for parliamentarians to understand the impact of the Home Office's direction of travel, and hopefully hearing the lived experience of those having to deal with it, it will enable us to reflect on how we can engage with the Home Office to try and deal with these profound issues. And again, it goes back to what Miha was saying, many of the issues around the digital approach. So thank you so much indeed. Our next speaker and the last speaker before the Q&A in the first session is Alexandra Bihar. And Alexandra, thank you so much for joining us. Alexandra has 6 years experience working as a community project officer and a Roma advocate for Granby Toxic Development Trust in Liverpool. Alexandra's work mainly includes supporting Liverpool's East European Roma communities. So I'm going to, Alexandra, hand over to you and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Yeah, my name is Alexandra. I am a Roma from Romania, and I come and start to work with the community from 2015. I provide the expert support and I facilitate the communication between the local authorities, for example, public health and social services with the Roma communities. At the same time, I deliver community projects intending to help the local communities who migrated to the UK in recent years to rebuild and make their lives here in Liverpool. I support them with their immigration status to access accommodation, education, welfare, healthcare, and employment. I want to ask Mihai if he can put a video, please.
Sure, yes, I'll do that.
Thank you very much.
Rezidență? Nu am știut, am crezut că o să dețină rezidența mea, nu am știut să ia plec.
Nu știu, doamna Alexandra, că dacă am crezut că am eu, are și copii, dar de unde? Că nu e așa, trebuie și la copii și le-am făcut acum.
Le-am făcut la unii și la unii nu am putut să mai trimit ce trebuie.
Nu știu.
Am crezut pur și simplu că îmi deține rezidența și nu e posibil să-i mai amplec. N-am știut că trebuie să-i mai amplec.
Ok. Caz de exemplu,
Nu știu nici carte, nu știu să mă descurc, nu știu, haba. Și am venit la dumneavoastră.
cum vă simțiți când copiii dumneavoastră nu au rezidență?
Mă simt prost, bă, de-aia vreau să le fac, ca să are și e, cum ai mult, să are și copiii mei, că așa merge.
Thank you very much, Mihai. This video was part of a project that I opened in September, and I will explain you more. But I wanted for you to see exactly the community, also them to have a voice in this meeting. In the last year, after the deadline, I see an increase of the number of Roma families who needed information about their immigration status or how they can make a late application for the EUSS. Unfortunately, the pandemic doesn't help us as a community to access these services or information. Or the support was online or by phone to do the EUSS application in 2020. As my organization that I work for don't apply for funding to support the Roma with their immigration status, I need to find support and contact to other organizations which they can have in their capacity, time, and staff to come together and support the community. I wanted face-to-face support for the Roma families, being aware of all this barrier to access these services. First, I found a church you see in the video is a church in the community, and they were happy to be with it as a venue for the drop-in session. We find an organization that receives funding to support vulnerable groups to apply for the EUSS. The name is Citizen Advice Liverpool, and together with their immigration advice worker, we start in September 2021 the support session. Starting from that date until the present, we are able to support Roma children and their parents with a late application. We're updating their online immigration account with new contact details or passport. Because of these drop-in sessions, we are able to identify the issue which my community continue face right now, trying to access their immigration account or starting a late application. For sure, it's not something new, and a lot of you are aware of this, but in a long term, this issue will affect the next generation. I was surprised when I start to do this kind of sessions to hear that the newborns children in the UK have only a 3 months deadline to apply for their status. The parents still are not aware of this deadline, thinking if they have pre-settlement status, the children will receive their status automatic. This is happening only with the settlement status. The children that receive support from us are all late application. We still see children coming to apply for their EU status. Children that applied last year in September still don't receive any answer about their application, if was or not accepted, or to receive a certificate of the application with a reference number. We have an issue as well with parents. They don't apply or have trouble getting a job or rent property because they are still waiting for a decision. For example, we have a client, a Roma man, 32 years old, father of 4, applying for EUSS in June 2021, before the deadline, and received his certificate of application in November 2021. From that moment, he applied for different jobs, providing a share code to the employer to see that his application is being processed. For all employees, this was not enough and don't accept it. He's still unemployed. This was not an isolated case. In the last months, more people come asking to contact the employers and explain to them that they still have the right to work, even if their application is being processed. The same issue we have with landlords, where they don't accept a certificate of application to rent a property. I need to highlight that individuals who submitted an application to the EUSS have their existing right protected until the application is decided. This issue are with the current application, but from my experience, I expect more to come up when the Roma will need to switch from pre-settlement status to settlement status, because the process will be the same. It's not enough to put your name and the reference number and you'll be granted settlement status. You'll need to do a new application. You'll need to apply in the same way. And we see that for our community, it is a hard process. And if we take into consideration their lack of skills to use the app or to understand the application process, will be very hard. I am particularly worried about this because we don't know who will be able to help them or their children. We are grateful for the interest of the Home Office to support our community in the last years, providing funding to organizations, and was helpful for millions of people. But the current problem that we see right now is not ending with the application. This is why is a need for the local authorities to step up and develop a EUSS aftercare support services for the long term, so people can get help when they need it, and not just at the moment. Thank you very much.
Sandra, thank you so much. I think that was a very clear and concise way in which you articulated some of the profound challenges the community is facing, and also some of the opportunities for central and local government to step up to the plate. And hopefully the Home Office looking to support local government in meeting those challenges. And hopefully it's one that members of Parliament on the seminar today will hear loud and clear. So thank you very much indeed. I know that there are just only a couple of questions, and I'll maybe go to them in just a moment. If you do have questions for any of our panelists, please do type question into the chat function and we will come to you. I know that Asan is wanting to raise a very quick matter, and if it pertains to today's session, Asan, very happy to take that question if you want to turn on your mic at all.
Hi there. This is not a question, I want to explain your case from last week. My name is Asen Slachev and I work for Luton Roma Trust. This is a grassroots organization dealing with Roma in Luton. I got over than 27 years experience working with Roma, but just to emphasize this case from last week, on the Romanian border at the airport, a lady, Roma lady, was stopped there and requested from her to provide some proofs about her status in UK. She couldn't provide because she did a paper application form, so she couldn't provide any certificate of application or share code. And she being returned back to, she was not allowed to fly to UK. In UK, in Luton, she got a 7-year-old son who is at the moment here in Luton, and she's in Romania. She cannot fly to. This is one case. We had another case similar like this, but family just flew to France and then passed the border by car, just get back to UK. Again with application. I wanted just to raise this and to make you aware about cases like this. I don't know, is there any agreement between Home Office and Ministry of Interior of Romania? But this makes us worry about, especially for Roma, because she is traditional Roma, and she looks like this, so she being stopped because of. I suppose that she be stopped because of this.
Well, what I would say, I think, well, first of all, it's very sorry to hear that. I would also hope that you're contacting your friend's local member of Parliament, and because she will be a constituency member who she has a constituent of someone, given the fact that she lives in the UK, and also maybe any kind of contact with the Roma support group who might be able to assist with that as well. I know also there's a question from Lise about trying to help some folk. Again, what I would encourage you to do is maybe touch base with the Roma support group after this event to see if any assistance can be offered to you. So I've also noticed that Andy Slaughters had to leave as a member of Parliament, and he's a great supporter of the the all-party group. So we're thanks to him for attending us. If there is actually no other questions, I'm going to bring in coming into our next speakers, unless anybody else has another question at all. Okay, we've got a question from Cosmina. Cosmina, do you want to come online and ask your question?
Yeah, sure. So it's basically, I'm at Citizens Advice Liverpool, and we have a grant-funded project for helping people with their EUSS applications. Now, our grant funding has been extended by the Home Office, but only until September and at a reduced rate, which means that we've lost one of our caseworkers. We've basically reduced our workforce by 30%, and at the same time, the cases are becoming more complex, more time-consuming, more difficult. And there's a squeeze that we just can't meet. So I'm wondering what other organizations, other support organizations are finding in terms of funding, because I think that's really where the problem is. And I think all the speakers today have also touched on it, that there needs to be sustained long-term funding for supporting people who struggle with this digital system.
Cosme, I think you've probably answered your own question. They're all probably finding the exact same problems that you are in Liverpool, and it's a constant demand to the Home Office and to other departments in the UK government about how you enable support to be delivered when you're not willing to invest in it. You get what you pay into it, and quite clearly, if you're disinvesting, you're going to see a reduction in the delivery of the service. I would also say, as someone who's a bit of a tech geek, that I'm very much aware that any country that seeks to digitize systems, the only ones which are effective are those who ensure that there is proper support from a transition to a digital process. And even with that, you still make sure that the traditional way of accessing any public service is still fully accessible the traditional way.
Yes, it needs to run in parallel, and like you say, it's the lack of investment, and also it's short term. So the grant funding was originally due to end in March 2020. Yes, it was extended. Yes, we actually bid for more. We actually managed to secure more funding. I was part of that bid and part of that expansion. We worked really, really hard, and we've constantly had 3-month contracts, 6-month contracts. It's not really acceptable. I mean, I'm glad that we've managed to continue for as long as we have. We're now at 2 years and 9 months. We've got to hit the 3-year mark, which is incredible considering my contract was originally for 9 months. But this is the problem. It was never set out with a long enough term in mind.
Yeah, very much indeed. So thank you for your question. I know that Louise is looking to come on for a question. Louise, if you want to come on.
Yeah, thank you for that. I just put a message in the chat regarding a family that I'm working with. They are Gypsy Roma family currently living in Rotherham, and they are from Romania. Currently, there's mum and 4 children. One of them doesn't have a birth certificate at all. The other 3 do have birth certificates, but they're very tatty and need replacing. So I've been tasked by social care to look into replacing and applying for the birth certificates that are needed. And also a question about passports. I think mum's had a passport, but it needs renewing. And obviously, because this is a new field for me, I'm not sure which direction to turn in really, but obviously you've had Clifton Learning Partnership on, so I think I will be seeking support from them as well, I think.
And also just to note what Pavlina said about contacting their own embassy to push them as well. And if they have a member of parliament, that's their member of parliament, knock the member of parliament's door as well until you get an answer. It's their right to ask that. I know that Miha quickly maybe wanted to come back in.
I wanted to suggest to Louise the same thing. Contact the Romanian embassy, and if you will have problems with that, I'm happy to assist with that as well. I've popped my email address in the chat box.
Thank you so much.
That will be helpful. But to add also on the point of the funding and so on, I have to stress something that was mentioned in the chat box as well. That the Home Office funding, although it was extremely useful and helpful for millions of EU citizens to secure a status in the UK, the purpose of that funding was to help people make applications, and therefore all of the efforts done was in relation to helping people to make applications, to submit applications, and it was missing on the follow-up work needed. And this is why we are saying that medium and long-term support needs to be put in place for all the follow-up work that is needed. People will need help to access, to understand how to, and to learn how to access their EUSS account, will need help to learn and how to access and use their digital immigration status. And there will be also problems coming up, which we are aware or we are not yet aware of. And it will be good for all local authorities, for parliamentarians to start thinking about this really, really serious, if we don't want to see big, huge problems coming up in the near future.
Very much indeed. Thank you so much for that. I'm just conscious of time, and I know I've got one speaker who probably didn't expect to be asked to speak, and I know that Councillor Nico Ion is on the line. And I just maybe, if you were there, sorry, if you, Nico, if you were there, to invite you to say a few words about your work in local government, being an elected councillor. And I'm just wondering if you could, a few words you'd like to say about what you've been doing.
Hello, everyone. Just a quick intervention. As a councillor working with the local community, I get many phone calls in the middle of the night from people from different countries in the European Union being detained at the borders. Just this Saturday, just to give you a brief example, someone rang me at 3 o'clock in the morning saying they've been detained at the France-UK border and they didn't know what's happening. And the way people are treated by the border police is horrific. This man in particular had his family in Darlington, just near Newcastle. And he was trying to return to his family. He went for a job in France and he was coming back and he wasn't allowed in. And, I get phone calls like that on weekly basis, and people are just being harassed by the UK authorities. And they picking on different reasons, such as, oh, your application is still pending, you can't travel. There was, there are a few instances where they say, well, even if you have the share code, you still can't enter the country because your application is still being considered, which I consider to be an abuse. And I wanted to raise this point of the way families are being separated and forced to leave the country because they'll have to, to make a decision for the family to remain in UK and one member of the family to be abroad, or everybody leaves the country to be reunited. And I think the UK authorities are doing this on purpose. Because at 3 o'clock in the morning, there's no one you can ring unless you have a councillor who would pick up the phone. I don't think an MP would pick up the phone at that time. My phone, it's it's publicly available, and I try to pick up the phones if anyone rings, because I think it's an emergency, so that's why I pick up the phone. But it's a very difficult job. And trying to discuss with the border authorities and trying to support the families. And just one point I was trying to raise at this meeting was the way people are treated at the borders. And I had, and I'll close my intervention with this, I had an email from somebody working in the European Parliament saying that they have statistics saying that people from Romania are being stopped more often than people from other European Union countries. Of course, my argument was that we have more people coming from Romania. That's why the statistics would show a higher number of Romanians stopped at the border. But maybe that's another thing we can look at and see if there's a prevalence in Romanians being stopped at the border and being ethnically profile, especially with the Roma population. So these are the 2 points I wanted to raise, and I'm really interested to work together to see how can we support these families that are being separated and are not allowed to enter the country, although they technically they could enter with the share code. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Erika. And I can say, as a former councillor, my phone used to go off at 3 o'clock in the morning all the time. And it is quite difficult when you're on the front line like that. And again, I do hope that your local MP or MPs are supporting you in that. I'm maybe just going to change the running order at the moment, because I know I've noticed that Denisa's got her hand up, and I was actually going to ask Denisa to be our next speaker anyway. And I know that her hand's up, and we're grateful that Denisa has been able to join us. Denisa is Roma, originally from Czech Republic, is a qualified immigration lawyer, currently working on complex EU resettlement scheme cases since 2019, and work includes collaboration with Air Centre, the New Europeans, and Coventry Law Centre. And Denisa, if we can hand over to you, I'm sure you will highlight some of the real complexity which many people face. We're going to hand over to you now.
Hi. Yes, so I have experience of working with Roma since 2006. So I've been working with Roma very long time. And I'm also fortunate to be the first qualified lawyer in the UK with European Roma origins. I am working as an immigration lawyer, and I've been working on the EU settlement schemes since 2019. So I dealt with hundreds of applications. So I specialize in complex cases, and I work with all sorts of vulnerable groups, such as victim of domestic violence, victim of trafficking and modern slavery, elderly people without skills using technology, children in care leavers, and so on. So I'm not going to be mentioning what the scheme actually is and what it means for people. So I'm going to go straight into the issues. And I'm very pleased that Nico and Asen mentioned the issues at the borders, because that's something what I actually notice increase of complaints from the borders from Roma individuals. In my opinion, the borders agents, they actually, well, it seems like racially profiling by the borders officers. So the Roma at the borders, they've been questions such as, what are you going to do in the UK? Where and who you're going to stay with, how long you're coming for, and these sort of questions, despite having the passenger locator form, what is actually answering all those questions. So the locator form, it doesn't need anymore, but that was just the locator form. That doesn't need since I think 2 weeks ago, but this came to my attention when actually the passenger locator form was compulsory. So, and I actually deal with a case where a Roma lady been living in the UK since, well, before December 2020. She made her application for EU settlement scheme, but due to lack of English and poor computer skill, she haven't provided the relevant evidence and her application was refused. Same happened to her son, who is 7 years old. And that's actually coming from Luton, this case, when the family was trying to cross the border from Luton. So her partner be granted a pre-settled status, because obviously the Home Office, they checked the HMRC record, they found the record, and he's been granted pre-settled status. But unfortunately, the lady and her son, the border agent decided that they have no leave to remain and no leave to enter as well. And they've been detained, but luckily they've been put on bail and they've been released from detention, but they've been returned straight away back to Slovakia. So in my professional opinion, the border agent should have granted leave to enter with the notice that they have to sort out the application, either to reapply or to submit administrative review or appeal it. By doing those things, their rights would extend and they would have leave to enter and leave to remain. But unfortunately, because obviously, the people, they were not aware of these rights, they were just returned back to their country of origins, and they're not allowed to come back unless they're going to have a status granted. And obviously, as Niku and Asen mentioned, the issue here is separating families. So the family has been torn apart because the father is in the UK, but the son and his partner, they have to stay in Slovakia. They have no family there. They have no money. They have no legal support. And obviously the child is missing education and also a valuable time with his father. So that's my first issue from my professional experience. Then, of course, there is the issues with certificate of applications. The certificate of applications, obviously, you have two versions. You have the digital version, and then you have the certificate itself. Most of the people, they manage to access the certificate of application digitally, which says that you can live in the UK and you can travel in and out UK providing required documents. But that's what the issue is, because if you apply as a joining family member, for example, as a durable partner, then obviously applying after the 31st of June 2020, which is late application, which is relevant date now, you're actually not allowed to travel. So that's what possibly causes the confusion of people, because they genuinely think they are allowed to travel, but unfortunately they aren't. So then I notice increase of application for elderly parents. So that's applications should be made out of country, because obviously it's after the deadline 31st of June 2021. And there is an issue with elderly parents struggle to operate the app. They don't know how to do it. That's a huge struggle for them. And there is also the issue of proof of financial or medical dependency on the child that already has the pre-settled status or settled status, who is kind of like seen as a sponsor for the parent. So I am just dealing now with a case when elderly lady, she basically became a widower, and she basically doesn't want to stay in her country of origin anymore because all her children live in the UK, and she is basically not self-sufficient by herself anymore due to all sorts of reasons. But unfortunately, because she became a widow after the 31st of December 2020, she is subject to proof of dependency on her children. So, to be honest, I don't know how it's going to be the outcome on this application yet. So this application is still in process. But I am especially concerned if there isn't any obvious form of dependency, then the application is highly likely to be refused. And then the elderly parents are going to have to be forced to stay without any support in a country of origins without the children. And then, another issue is basically one of the children's going to have to return back to the country, which is torn apart again, the family, because the child of the parent has a family in the UK again. So the family unit is going to suffer either way. And then I have to mention the issues for people with pre-settled status that have to apply for settled status in a 5 years' time. So my concern is, in 5 years' time, is there going to be any support for these people to actually apply for settled status? And well, if the person is reapplying for settled status, so they have to go through the process all over again. They can't just upgrade. For example, if the person applied with the ID, they have to send the ID again to the Home Office for the identification and proof of nationality purposes. So it is a whole new process again. The whole application for settled status is not only an upgrade, is actually a whole new application. So another issue is break continuity of residency. So there is lots of people, they actually have a pre-settled status, but they spent more than 6 months out of UK in any of 12 months period. As you know, the entitlement to settled status is 5 years of 5 years of residency in the UK. But if you spend more than 6 months out of the UK in any of those 12 months period during the 5 years, then you lose in the continuity of residency and you are not entitled to settled status anymore. So the Home Office makes some exemptions to this rule, such as absence up to 12 months for important reasons such as pregnancy, childbirth, serious illness, study, or coronavirus-related reasons. But if the restrictions for the coronavirus relaxed now, so it might be harder for the settled status applicants to rely on this concession. So applicants, all applicants with settled status due to the absence might become ineligible for settled status and their status might just lapse. So yeah, so that would be possibly my point to make what is the current struggle. So, but my proposed recommendations would be obviously Home Office, as already mentioned in this event, is to extend the funding and to make the funding sustainable, because the Home Office, they actually fund only 6 months, and after September 2020 it seems like there is going to be no funding from the Home Office, and if there is any funding, it's going to be very restricted and very limited. From my personal expertise as a professional and lawyer, my recommendation would be for the Home Office to actually include Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which is family life, to be considered in terms of EU settlement scheme applications when they actually making refusals, because that would actually make it very much helpful, especially for durable partners and children to become entitled to EU settlement scheme, especially in those cases like Martina mentioned, when the sister was not eligible, because the obvious reason is a sister is not a family member in terms of the family members for the EU settlement scheme. But Article 8 might help this improve and might bring the definition of brother and sister into this scheme. Scrapping the requirement of dependency would also help lots of applicants, and would help with better prospect of having their status approved. Then, of course, administrative review and appeals fee. So I can give you example. Administrative review is £80 fee for each applicant. So for my example of the Roma lady that has EU settlement scheme application refused, so for her and her son to do an administrative review, which cost them £160. So that's completely unaffordable. So they don't have that money. Appeal hearings, they're even more expensive. The fee is £140 for each appeal. And pre-settled status holders to be eligible to upgrade to settled status without the requirement of being in the UK for at least 6 months in each consecutive year. So that is my sort of recommendations how to improve people eligibility to live and stay in the UK, and to continue have the right to live, work and access services in the UK. Thank you for having me.
Lisa, thank you so much indeed. You mentioned one word, struggle, and this has been nothing but a struggle for those in the community seeking to utilise the scheme. And I remember back in 2015 into 2016, the constant mantra around Brexit was a reduction in bureaucracy. At least from my personal and political perspective, it has been nothing but adding red tape, bureaucracy, and becoming cost prohibitive, in many ways exclusionary to the most vulnerable in our communities. And I think you've clearly put that out, and that's impact. A lot of people talk about Brexit in terms of the issue around the economy, in terms of big businesses. Also the individual impact of the policy decision has on individual people and their families, I think has been laid bare, not just by your presentation, but everyone's presentation. So thank you so much indeed. I also want to note that the entire panel is from the Roma community, and so I'm very delighted that that has happened. And I might, maybe if there's no further, I noticed not so many questions, I want to maybe pose some questions to our panelists. In terms of the Home Office, in terms of the settlement scheme funding ending in March 2022, you had mentioned, Denise, what issues might arise and should further support be available? I think I know what the answers are going to be. I just wonder if you, for example, Denise, if you have anything further to say what you've already said in terms of the issues that will impact the community with a reduction in funding.
Yeah. So the reduction of funding, well, that's going to have an impact not only for Roma community, but all European communities, because basically, as Mihai mentioned, the Home Office funding has been granted only to actually make the application, but there is no follow-up plan. So there is nothing after what is happening with all, like, aftermath, what is actually happening after the application are going to submit it. So at the moment, I'm still dealing with new applications. But they obviously all late applications, so which is all complex applications. And it's just take us so much longer to resolve those. So I believe even after September, I'm still going to have lots of applications that I'm going to have to deal with, because they've been submitted before June, and obviously now as well. And there is no going to be funding. So as correctly Andra mentioned, I don't know whether there is going to be any possibility for the Home Office to extend our fundings, but Home Office, they are going to really restrict the funding, and it's going to be limited to few grant funding organizations. They are funded at the moment. So the resolution or recommendation would be for the local authorities to actually start properly funding the aftermath for the EUSS, because it seems like the Home Office, I'm not sure if they're gonna do more funding after September. They might do, but it's going to be very restricted. And even now it's quite restricted, because obviously it's granted only to the grant funding organizations. They continue to funding them. I'm working for the grant funded organizations. And even, because obviously now we have more refusals and there is no legal aid for the EU settlement scheme. So if there is a refusal and you submit administrative review or appeal, and even the grant funded organization, they have to deal with those and go to hearings to help the applicants. So they have to apply for exceptional case funding applications and to be eligible for legal aid.
I just wonder if, in terms of mentioning local authorities, again, local authorities, and I'm not going to speak in terms of, for example, it's different slightly in Scotland, but at least I know in England, in terms of the funding remit, the drop in funding for local authorities, that they'll find it very difficult to step up to that plate without the appropriate funding from the Home Office. I'm just also wondering, Miha, before I bring you in, Martina, if you're still there, if you had shared, DC's worries about the future direction of travel for the funding and the impact on the community.
Well, with travel and all, it's we had lots of community who've been very struggled with it, borders and children and stress, anxiety that they cannot come back to the UK. I raised a couple issues when I emailed EUSS grant. They were really helpful. I look at the case, trying to help, but I personally still advise people, do not travel before you have not your status outcome, because you never know. And especially children have valid passport, trying to, encourage them, embassies and all. And how Alexandra mentions, parents just think they children, automatically granted because parent is already granted. So it's still confused and stressed, still not very understand all process. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm wondering, Alexandra, do you share the same concerns as well?
Yes, for sure. Mostly my concern is about the children, and because we still see that a lot of children need support. Also, like they apply and they still we have 8 months that we do an application, they don't receive a reference number, a certificate of application. They are stuck here. They cannot go back in their countries or for a holiday. They cannot travel. Unfortunately, the embassies doesn't do easy work for us, because, for example, Friday I do for a child an appointment for passport in Romanian embassy, and they give him the beginning of October, the appointment. Like, I feel that there needs a better communication also with the embassy and the home office to understand and like to support each other, because like to not make a hard work also for us. But for me, it's important to have something in place, to not expect all from the home office. Also, like what will happening after this funding's end. This is my worry. Like how much will we can support them? Because unfortunately, if we don't have a training, or if we are not lawyers, we cannot support them directly, give them a immigration advice and these kind of things, because it's illegal. How we will be able to support these communities?
Yeah, I think it's an important point you make about the embassy, and of course there are, I'm sure the all-party group, we could communicate with the ambassador and their team to see if we could discuss that at some point. I think that's a point very well made. Miha, you wanted to come back in as well.
Yeah, sure, thanks. Because we're talking about sort of work that can be done in the sort of potential absence of home office funding, and what is our role, what roles can local authorities do. I think we have to look at as Alda have mentioned, at the aftermath of, once people have been granted and so on. What's going on, because that's still needed for the long term. Not just people, don't just need help just with making new applications, but the ongoing work, that transition period needs to be put in place, because at the moment is lacking. So we have just put, we have just been basically put in the situation where we have to deal with this digital world. And there is no transition in place for us to learn about that and to adapt to the new situation and to be able to use it. And if that is not being put in place, then we will very soon start seeing more and more problems, which will then impact very much at the local level. People are already not able, are having issues with getting employment, are having issues with proving their status when accessing benefits. Things are happening around accessing health services already. So this is why we think that local authorities have to start developing their strategies around this transition period, around helping people to learn about it, to adapt to the situation, and to use it. Because it seems that the government does not want to drop the requirement of having the digital status altogether. So this is why we really need to think. If we look at, for example, how many people from the ones we've asked, we've seen that 31% have not been able to prove their status at all. It is a significant percentage. Those people, we had someone who was refused mortgage, others who could not get medications because of that, others who had to make second or third application for universal credit because they could not send that share code needed in time. So these things will just impact very much at local level, and on the local services, and will add pressure on that, and also on the on the benefit system and so on. So that's why we're trying to raise awareness of these particular things. Yes, support is still needed to make applicant, to help people to apply, because we're still seeing high levels of need around that. But we have to start thinking about the long-term need as well, and the collaboration.
Sorry, just on the notion of a long-term, and I want to bring everybody else back in again. What would you see as the long-term viable? How to make a support service? What should it look like in the long term? If you had the ability to say this is what it should look like, what should it look like?
Sure. I was just going into that. There is already we can call it a successful example. The EUSS itself, the collaboration with our community groups, with all the organizations, have transcribed into some, many millions of people who have applied, hundreds of thousands of vulnerable people who have been able to secure immigration status. And so this example can be then, continued further. We can learn on that, how this collaboration took place, what enabled it, and so on, what is needed. We think very much that community groups have to be involved in this process of thinking how to develop these long-term support services, and not just organizations, but also relevant individuals from different communities who they can be, for example, church leaders or staff working in local schools, and so on. So there are, key people who have to be considered in this process. Of course, resources, that's very important and very much needed for this process. And this should include, appropriate, accessible sort of communication methods with communities who will need this support, and developing simple systems to provide that assistance. So if we develop some support and we have a really complex referral system in place, or a really complex system of getting an appointments and so on, that would just complicate things. And then the focus, I think, should be having these services to be able to welcome people, to create a welcoming space where people can go. Let's say, for example, if they need to update their phone number for the EUSS account and they don't know how to do that, it should be somewhere, a place or someone they can go to help them change that phone number. If they want to prove, and if they want to get the share code as well, and if they need help, a service where they can go and get the help to get the share code and share it with whoever needs it. And also there should be created opportunities for people to learn about the digital system, to be trained to learn about it, and so they can get opportunities to adapt to it and then use it themselves.
Thank you. I maybe just want to bring back some other speakers on that very point around what should this support service look like. Alexandra, would you agree with Miha about how the future direction of it should be?
Yeah. I was thinking, because we have for the local authorities, it will not be an issue of the space or the venues, these kind of things. We have job centers, we have stop shops for the cancers, and this kind of services, like somewhere where to go to update their passport, the IDs if they need it, the phone numbers if they lost, emails, contact details, address, or if they have question, to go in a place and to find the answer. We don't need to reinvent the wheel or to do something special, but only to go in a place and to find this support, because it's a need not only for us, the Roma, but for all the Europeans. And there are millions of Europeans that still has them after they apply with this status.
Thank you. And Denisa, you want to come into that as well?
Yes, I do, please. Yes. So from my point of view, it's going to be very difficult to actually find, because it's highly likely after September it's going to be difficult to find a lawyer who actually is going to have continuity of funding for the EUSS. And I don't know whether there is going to be fewer grant-funded organizations. They're going to continue to provide legal advice, or what's going to happen. So in my point of view, there is going to be a fewer grant-funded organizations, so it's going to be more difficult to find a law center or a community group, or even a lawyer that is going to continue providing legal advice and support in terms of EU settlement schemes. So, well, my proposal is, same as Mihai mentioned, and Andra as well. So, of course, the grant-funded organization should continue provide legal advice, in regards to EU settlement scheme, and the local authorities, they should fund beyond the Home Office grant scheme if it's scrapped. So because there is going to be no legal advice after that, and as Andra already mentioned, community workers, support workers, social workers, they're not entitled to advice legally in terms of immigration, because if you're not registered as an immigration advisor, then with the EUSS, then obviously you are providing legal advice, illegal immigration advice, and that's actually criminal offense. So so that's basically my point. So that's what the local authorities should thinking about as well, if there is no more Home Office funding beyond September.
Thank you. I think before I bring in Martina finally to this point, I think some points are being raised in the chat that local government will find that very difficult, because they'll of course getting their funding cut from central government as well, and that puts an extra burden on resources, and it's going to be a very difficult time ahead. Martina, would you like to come in as well around your vision for that support service, if it were working effectively, how it should look?
I definitely agree with Mihai, Alexandra, and Denisa. People need, support where they can feel welcome, and definitely, they can have that support and language. With everything about EU settlement scheme, they need to understand all process and still have the support from professionals, communities, family support workers, social workers. So I just don't want to say what Mihai, Alexandra, Denisa said. So I agree everything what they said.
Thank you. I think there's an overarching theme is, that collaboration can work even at, a local level, but it always requires investment, especially if you're a voluntary-based or civic-based organization. You might have a couple of employees, you've got a lot of volunteers, that comes at a price. And if you're delivering support, especially if it's official legal support, it requires investment to enable it to actually work effectively. And I'm very grateful for so many of you who have taken the time to join us today, and to maybe wrap up by saying that I think for those of us in Parliament, whether it's myself or colleagues in the House of Commons or House of Lords, the report will be food for thought, and also the opportunity to utilise this information in the Chamber and how we debate and discuss with ministers about effective support for the scheme, and not just, as so many of the speakers have said, for the Roma community, but everyone who is from another EU nation state, and the support that they may require, critically those who are the most vulnerable. I just want to finally thank our speakers, Miha Bika from Policy Campaigner Work from the Roma Support Group, and for everything that they have done for helping us to bring together everyone today. I'm very grateful for the work that you continue to do, especially during the pandemic as well. Martina Stepakova from Clifton Learning Partnership, thank you so much for joining us, and also to Alexandra Bauer. And Denise, finally to you, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your professional overview of everything today from a legal perspective. I'm extremely grateful. And once the report is published, certainly will be shared by the Roma Support Group and also by the all-party parliamentary group between parliamentarians. So again, thank you all so much for joining us. It was a pleasure to see you all, and we hope to see you soon. So thanks again, everybody, and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That was really helpful. It was very interesting. Thank you.